Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today in War Thunder we have another devblog for another Italian tank. Now this is one of the tanks which, well, we kind of knew was coming to the game, but it's kind of nice to see. It's the M1441. Now, what is the M1441? Well, it's a medium tank, which weighs 14 tons, made in 1941. And it comes in the line of the M series of tanks, which is probably going to make up the backbone of rank 1 and rank 2 of the Italian tree. Basically, we're going to have some of these vehicles, and then on a similar chassis, or the same chassis, some Semiventes, and I feel like that will be, rank 1 and rank 2 of Italy, maybe with some other vehicles, such as, like, the L6, but I don't know. I don't really see the L6 coming to game just because it's very, very slow, and it wouldn't be a very nice starter vehicle for a lot of people. Anyway, looking at this tank made in 1941, basically what you have is a platform which houses a 47mm in a turret, and the penetration of the gun isn't the best, but if you get close enough, just like in a lot of rank 2 vehicles, you should be completely fine. And what it talks about in the devblog here is 500 meters is what they're looking at. Now, since the M1340 came before it, when they actually went into battle with the M1340, basically they took the experiences that they learnt with that and built the M1441. I think the best way to describe it is like the Sherman series of tanks, or like the Cromwells, or the let's say the cruiser tanks in general for British. You make a general model, you see how well it does, you try and constantly improve it and make it better, and the M1441 is one of those improvements over the original. Now, one of the things that has been interesting to think about over the last week or so since we've known about Italian tanks is that none of these devblogs have talked about reload rates, and this is something I want to bring up. So the M1441 has 4 crew. It has 2 in the turret, 2 in the hull. You have the machine gunner / Radeon man, you got the driver, commander / loader, and then the gunner, or even the gunner / loader. So, with that said, with the 47mm, this shouldn't be, too hard to reload. The turret has a decent amount of space, there should be plenty of room to put shells in. But for the other vehicles, the 90mm on the Breda or the Semivente 105, the reload rate isn't talked about, and I'm wondering if this is going to be where the Italians are going to shine. Rapid fire, very powerful ammunition. One of the things that we saw from the British when they were released, like with the Cromwells and the Valentines, with the 40mm, the 57mm especially, was really good fire rates. And even though they didn't do a ton of damage, it was fun to use them because of this. And obviously the reverse gear kind of didn't exist for Britain back then. But with something like the M1441, with a high fire rate, with a shell which should do a lot of decent damage with it in, then we have at least the makings of an interesting tank here. Now, what else is interesting about the M1441? Well, it has one of the tank destroyers on it, or built from the chassis of it, the M1441 chassis, which I'm personally looking forward to, and I can't see it not coming into game, at least in some kind of rank 3 capacity. This is the Semivente 9053. As you can see, M1441 chassis, put a gun shield on it on the back, and put a massive 90mm on it. The reason why they didn't centrally mount it is because of basically balancing issues and how it would have been very hard to get the gun stabilized at any point to fire. So this is what you have. You can tell the sheer weight of the gun just because they had to lower the back, or the stress on the back of the chassis is right there. There was also a command version of the M1441 where they took off the turret here, and you can see it's much more, much more commandy. This could be like a weird like scout vehicle, I suppose, or something like that. Maybe one of the first rank 1 scout vehicles. But anyway, one of the after looking at those two vehicles, you can see that there are some vehicles, at least with the Semovente 9053, maybe not with the command vehicle, but there is some exploration for the chassis. So it is lovely to see this Devblog, so we know that the chassis is coming, even though I think we could have all guessed that it was. What I'm going to talk about is a line in this which seems very interesting. So they talk about, the 47mm, how it should be good apart from over 500 meters. I think we can all agree that's fair enough. For the engine, though, what they say is when it comes to moving around on the battlefield, the M1441 won't exactly be spearheading the attack, but it also won't lag behind its allies. Powered by a 125 horsepower diesel engine, the M1441 can reach a maximum top speed of 33 kilometers an hour. So, with that said, it would be lovely for these Italian tanks if we talked about acceleration instead of top speed. Top speed of 33 kilometers an hour is pretty abysmal when we talk about lower tiers. What you've got to remember is M3 Stuarts and M5 Stuarts are running around. Cromwells are running around. BT5s and stuff like T50s are running around. So with that said, top speed of 33 kilometers an hour is bad. But what is really bad is the power to weight ratio of this machine. Like having a horsepower of 125 and being 14 tons, well, let's compare it to some of the other vehicles that we see from other nations. So first of all, these are the best comparisons I could find. So understand that they're not exact, but they'll give you a general idea of how the acceleration will work on the thing, and also how how it will feel in War Thunder. Understand that the RPMs might be a little bit different, but the horsepower and the tons are pretty similar. So here's the Valentine Mark 1, slightly heavier, slightly more horsepower than the M1441, but it should feel very similar to it, since the ratios are very similar. The SU-76M, which is less weight and more horsepower, so it will actually be worse than this machine by quite a lot, and this isn't exactly something that's speeding around the battlefield. It's actually quite slow. The Panda 38T, which has the same horsepower, but is also less by 4 tons, and this thing is actually it's okay around the battlefield. The Sturmpanzer is more comparable though. 16 tons, so a little bit higher, but also a little bit higher horsepower. Once again, this is not breaking any speed records, and the main issue with it is the acceleration. The M3 Stuart, which pretty much has a little bit less of the tonnage and double the horsepower of the engine. So once again, this thing should be about twice as fast when it comes to acceleration, and even max speed, as you can see here, compared to the M1441. So when they talk about a rank 2 vehicle, I pointed out here a bunch of rank 1 ones, and the rank 2 ones that we can have a look at. It's very hard to find comparable vehicles when we're talking about tonnage and horsepower. Like, I would have to do some calculations to work out which one was the most similar. But overall, most of the rank 2 vehicles from most nations have a hell of a lot more horsepower than this thing. Even like the KVs, 600 horsepower, and they're pretty nippy, heavy tanks. I mean, there isn't really rank 2s apart from maybe the Matilda that we see at 2.7, which, this thing will never get anywhere near, which has a very, very bad, power to weight ratio with 190 horsepower and 27.3 tons. But then you look at the Comrail, 600 for 28 tons. The Valentine is 165 for 18 tons. So what I would say is, with the Valentines, you're generally probably getting about a similar feel for the Valentines compared with the M1441. And for me, that is not good. for this machine. That power to weight or that acceleration that this thing's going to have is really not going to be very good. Another thing is that it has thin tracks, and I don't know how much this affects in War Thunder, but obviously in heavy conditions, this shouldn't really do it very well. It should actually struggle to get through a lot of the heavy terrain that some of the maps have. All of the maps have shown all of these Italian vehicles on the Italy map, which, kind of makes sense since they are Italian. But it's, I think, trying to sell these things as comparable when it comes to the engine power as some of the, some of their counterparts in other nations, I think is a little bit optimistic, I think would be the word that I use. And when I talk about like the BR of this thing, the 47 should be okay. I'm really struggling to work out where you put this thing for a BR, because wherever you put it, like let's say if you put it from the range of 1-3, which they're not going to put it at 1-3. I mean, it's a rank 2 vehicle. Actually, do the French have some 1-3s for rank 2? Let's see. Oh no, their lowest is 1-7. Okay, so even this thing, even the French, even the French with the AMC, this has a better power to weight ratio. God damn. The S35. I suppose it does have a better power to weight ratio than some of the first French vehicles. Oh, that's pretty close to it actually. So the H39, or the H39, it's 2 ton off, but it's just less in horsepower. So the performance of the M1441 should be slightly better than the H39 when it comes to its maneuverability. So if you want to work out, how well this thing's going to do running around the place, then yes, maybe work out that it's a little bit better than the H39 when it comes to horsepower and tons. As I said, RPM and stuff like this not included, such as torque. The other things to mention about this machine is its armor. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. So, for the M1441, since I can't really pin down a BR, I believe it's probably about 1.7 to 2.0 to 2.3, if I was going to guess, and I would hazard more towards the 2.0 area. This has 30 millimeters of armor on the front of it, and 45 millimeters of armor on the turret. So this is talked about here. So being in the thick of the fighting, however, requires a certain level of armor protection in order to prevent the vehicle from quickly being knocked out. However, like many vehicles at its rank, the M1441 isn't particularly well armored, with its armor going up to 30 millimeters at its strongest, in the turret front plate up to 45 millimeters. So this will prove sufficient against HMG fire or heavy machine gun fire, but it'll have nothing on the guns that people are actually going to be using, because nobody at this level, what I'm talking about, like 1.7 to 2.3, uses just machine guns unless they're AA vehicles. Imagine if a Flak Panzer or a let's actually have a look, because one of the best tank destroyers in the game when it first came out was the T-17E2, but I'm thinking of the AC Mark IIA here. This thing pens 40 millimeters, so it should be able to easily pen the hull. Since the hull, as said in this Devblog, is 30 millimeters, and then the turret is 45 millimeters, at least that's what it says, so, if it's wrong, please don't blame me, because that does seem a bit dodgy. Will this thing actually get hull broken? Now, at the BR that you find it, this generally won't matter, because the only things that will be able to hull break it are donkey guns, like the Sturmpanzer, and these would normally one-shot you anyway. But it is an interesting consideration to have, because it's just one of those interesting things. Now, sometimes you do survive a shot, from the larger guns, and sometimes if you have that opportunity, then you may be able to fight on. I suppose the majority of the time game, you won't. But in that 5% or 2% chance where you survive, it would be nice. But if you're hull broken instead, then obviously, you know, you're gonna be screwed. And the threshold of hull break is, I believe, either higher or the same as 30 millimeters. So if you take out the turret and just include the hull, technically this thing should be hull broken. But we're gonna have to see when it comes to the game. I would highly be surprised if that is the case. Another last thing I do want to mention that I haven't talked about in other Italian devblogs, the camouflages that the Italians have, such as this one that you see here, obviously the normal one, and then other one that you see here, and this, I am a massive fan of. I think the camouflages that the Italians get, or are going to get in War Thunder, are a really nice combination of colours. It reminds me when the Japanese were added to the game, where they themselves got a hell of a lot of really nice coloured camouflages. So one thing to look forward to for me, just in general, for a lot of these Italian vehicles, is the camouflages themselves. Anyway, we also have a Q&A to go over today from the developers, but for now, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.